First up, the what and why of personal branding. It's really all about personal branding, not making yourself an online influencer. That's certainly not the aim of becoming a personal brand in any way, shape, or form. What it is more about thought leadership. It's about giving people great value to want to follow you, not so much to become the Bali bikini under a waterfall influencer type. That's not what we're looking at. It's more to do with you being a leader in your segment, in the area of your expertise. It also means that you're clearly demonstrating your area of expertise in your area of expertise. You want to show people that you know what you're talking about. You're not just some mug who's making up facts about history or just coming up with baseless opinions about stuff. You actually have some constant credibility in the space that you're talking on. That's pretty important to have. Someone who's working on personal brand could do that through writing articles online. They could be doing it by being on podcasts. You express your expertise through all these ways, producing videos on YouTube or even short format stuff on things like Reels and TikTok and posting on social media in general. If you're sharing more than just your thoughts and feelings of what you had for breakfast, then the chances are you're starting to walk in that personal brand territory online. So why do we do personal brand? Why in the heck would we even bother with it? Well, it's simply because we get further ahead with one than we do without one. Let me tell you what I mean. In my situation, in my experience, I didn't have to apply for the two main contracts that I have now when I became available to be able to work on them. I didn't have to go through a selection criteria. I didn't have to do a cover letter or a resume. They came to me so that when, say, both CDUs, Charles Darwin University and the Darwin Innovation Hub approached me, they already knew what I did. They already knew my work because it's all out there on the internet for anyone to see. I have workshops, webinars, and networking events to fill. So I don't do that just simply by going, come to my workshop. I have to give people a reason why they should choose my workshop over the plethora of other things they've got to do in their lives between 5:30 and 7 p.m. on a weekday night or during their lunch break during the week. I also have international students graduating, and I need to have the influence and the ability to be able to place them in work experience, in things like new jobs, to say that, oh, you've worked with Dante? Good. I would love to give you a go. So in my experience, this has been a very powerful way of having credibility and then transferring that credibility onto my students as well. I also have my own business to attract clients to. And this is just as important because I'm not necessarily, in fact, I'm not advertising at all. I have not run a single ad for my business in the last 2 years. And that's simply because I've used my credibility in the marketplace, the work I've done that's very much on show in the marketplace to be my advertising for me. I don't have to pay for it. It kind of speaks for itself. I also don't want to have to pay for advertising for any of this stuff. So I've got to choose some way of making sure that my things are out there, my opinions, my thoughts, my feelings, my credibility, my reputation is out there without having to pay for it, because I just refuse to pay for online advertising these days. It's simply too expensive and too hit and miss to be accurate enough for what I want to achieve. So what are the forms of personal branding? Well, there's about 7 of these. And the first one is what I call thought leadership. Someone like Simon Sinek, for instance, he has a certain area that he speaks into, which is usually to do with not so much entrepreneurship, but maybe leadership, very much about leadership and futurism and trends. He speaks to that, and he's very popular in that. In fact, he's very well known for it. There's many viral videos that have been shared extensively. Now, while 2023 has actually been a very quiet year for Simon, he certainly had a big 5 years before that. So I'll be interested to see what his next moves will be. Then we've got the connector, the person who is really good at introducing people to other people. I like to think that I'm something of that. I like to be able to share my connections with everybody, even my competitors, to get them to have a look at the kind of people that I'm mixing with so they can mix with them too. The connector is very keen. You see them tagging people online all the time. It's a very common thing they do. The altruist is someone who definitely offers more than they would seem to get in response. So, what I'm saying is they may offer more assistance, more help, more expertise, more sharing of their knowledge than what it seems to be that they're getting back from it. They seem to be putting a heck of a lot more in than they're getting back out. These people tend to either do it for very altruistic reasons, so as they're doing it as a form of social capital, or they just want to give because that's in their nature to give. They also could be the person that may appear altruistic, but they also happen to play a very long game. They're not looking for short-term results on anything. They're playing a long game so that people will see the results of what their good work has been in years to come. The careerist is all about doing everything they can to get ahead in their career. They want to be seen to be someone who's an expert in what they do so that they will be chosen ahead of other people when it comes to great opportunities. Yeah, I might have done a little bit of that in my time. The hipster is someone who generally is an early mover towards new trends that are a little bit countercultural or a little bit controversial or perhaps a little bit contrarian. So they tend to be, mostly millennials. Mostly millennials fit into that hipster vibe, although you do see some in Generation Z as well, in younger people who are definitely looking for, I guess, an edge. They're looking for an edge, something that's very different about them. They like to be seen as individual, not as people who follow the crowd, not necessarily as leaders or thought leaders, though, but at least not people who follow the mainstream. Next up, the provocateur, Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world. This guy is definitely the provocateur. He's a little bit controversial in that he doesn't necessarily have controversial views of his own. In fact, his own views are remarkably mild. But what he does like to do is have people talk, let people come onto the show and just talk. And he's been kind of, thought of as a bad thing for some of that. But in most of the cases, he allows people to share their point of view, engages in that conversation, but doesn't necessarily take a stand on that point of view for right or for wrong, for left or for right, for good or for bad. None of it. He doesn't take a stand. He just tends to nod his head and go, okay, interesting, interesting, and lets people talk themselves. The other one is the selective, someone who only tends to work with a very small, selective group of people in personal brands because they are seeking not necessarily to work with the world or become famous, but just to be well known and well liked and well trusted within their small niche of people who take their online course, join their club, join their exclusive Facebook group, that kind of thing. So, how this plays out on LinkedIn then is in the form of posts, articles, events, and newsletters. Let me show you how that works. In posts on LinkedIn, this is an example of a recent one I did about 3 weeks ago. And I was talking about how I'd never say this, never thought I would say this, but there's far too much going on in Darwin. There's too much going on. People tend to think of small regional centres as being places that are boring and nothing much happens. But in August this year, it was crazy. There was so much on. So my post was an opinion that I backed up with a story. So posts are definitely the entry-level way of becoming a personal brand online. Excuse me. Articles then are like an extension of that on LinkedIn. So articles are one of the options you'll get for when you just go to first create some kind of post. Now, it may not be an easy one to find if you're posting from mobiles, but on the desktop, it's one of the first four that just show up when you choose to do a post and share what's going on. So some of those posts I've done have been controversial. This one's quite old, back in 2022. It was quite well read, about 4 myths about social media that we really need to let go of. I've written about 165 or 166 articles now on LinkedIn, so it's quite a back catalogue of them. But what I generally use them for is my newsletter, which is another thing we'll look at in just a second. Events, though, on LinkedIn work very much like events on Facebook. The difference is here that you're also, yes, available. You're able to invite your connected people to these, but because the people you're connected to on LinkedIn are a lot more likely to be aligned with the event than, say, people who are on Facebook. So if you're creating let's say a business development event, and all your friends are friends and family on LinkedIn and not on Facebook, and not particularly people who you do business with, well, then you find that business events are not even given as an option for categorizing on Facebook because they are so irrelevant to it. But on LinkedIn, they are definitely something that we have as front and center in the kind of events that are run. There's also their newsletters, which are essentially just an article. You go to write an article, and then what it allows you to do is to send that out as a notification to people who have specifically subscribed to your newsletter. But it will also then appear in the feeds of a lot of the people who follow you. So in this case, I've got about 1,827. I think that's about 1,840 something now as I record this. And I've got like over 12,000 now, over 12,500 on the email version of this. So every Saturday morning, I send this out on LinkedIn. And then at the same time on Saturday mornings, I send out my email newsletter as well. So we're looking at those four really main areas on LinkedIn: posts, we're looking at articles, then events, and finally newsletters on LinkedIn as the key places for you to live out that personal brand. Whatever your position happens to be, whatever your personality type happens to be, that's where it happens. Now, to enable these extra features, because you probably notice you don't have a newsletter available to you on LinkedIn right now. Well, it's all part of a thing called creator mode. So you go into your profile and you'll see under resources, which is only a section that you'll see this creator mode where you can get discovered, showcase content on your profile, and get access to creator tools. What that means is you're able to have a newsletter. So when you create an article, you can make it automatically be a newsletter that's sent out to the people on LinkedIn through notifications for your new newsletter. You'll also get far better analytics. Now, usually analytics, are things that are quite boring, like who looked at my profile, and you get a little bit of that when you're a free subscriber. If you pay like I do, you get a much broad. You see everybody who basically saw your profile. But now what you're seeing is analytics that are ahead of like how many people have seen this particular post, what the advanced analytics are in terms of the jobs they have, the companies they work for, the locations they're in. Then you'll also get what we call live events. So live is not just audio as it says on screen, it's also video events. Your ability to live stream something like this workshop or this webinar onto LinkedIn directly. People can watch it on LinkedIn. It saves as a video or as an audio file on LinkedIn. You also get this little section on your profile called highlights, which allows you to see the things that you want to highlight about yourself. So in my case, I've got both sign up for my main newsletter via email and then a mini course I'm running, which is all about either one of the 5 that I've got in place for ChatGPT, for personal branding, for getting more bookings, and I think the 4th, there's actually 4 of them. Remembering the very first one, which is how to write better for social media on there. So those mini courses are something that I continually get people through because as they see my profile after seeing some of my content online, then they may see, oh, you've got a mini course and it's free. Let me have a look at that. Now, your plan of action for this should be involving you working out first who you are. And that may seem like a really pithy question, but the reality is if you don't know who you are, you won't know who to put forward as your personal brand. So I've got a very special video in the Darwin Innovation Hub channel here on YouTube about building your own personal brand. I've also got a mini course that runs over 5 weeks that will give you hints and tips on how to live that out. So the video on here is like an introduction, but the mini course is 5 emails delivered to you over 5 weeks that you work on each of the 5 main areas of personal branding in your own time over 5 weeks. But really, when it comes down to it, as a summary, we're looking to work out what your values are. We want you to be able to choose your voice, get a point of view, select what content to make. Knowing your values can be as simple as just going out and working out who you are. I've got a pretty good network of people because I was able to define these things. So knowing your values is not just saying the things that I wish I was. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's who you are on your best days, on your worst days, on the days when you wake up in a bad mood, on the days where you're not really quite your best. Those are the things that come forward every time. So I've got 5. I recommend you only choose 3. 5 is really hard to work with, and I've got to really drop a couple of those. But my 5: honesty, approachability, vulnerability, effectiveness, and finally, authenticity. All the things that have Very, very important to me. So I could probably bundle vulnerability, authenticity, and honesty into the one because they all really come down to a variation of honesty. So yeah, maybe I've got three as well. But those values were something I wrote down. I started off with about 39 different things that I thought were about me. I then eliminated the things which I'm not on my bad day, or I can't live up to on my bad days. Then I eliminated more that I couldn't even live up to on even some of my good days. And then I eliminated all the things that I thought they're not even me. They're what I wish I was. And I was left with those five. So that's how I worked that out. Choosing your voice then is about the kind of, I guess, presentation style you have. Are you excited like a YouTuber? Or are you more of a teacher, more of a clear communicator? Are you someone who is very fact-based, or you like to be able to draw in a lot of analogies and metaphors and stories in which you present your point of view? So in that, figure out who your values are, what your voice is, and then get a point of view. So I've got very strong opinions about multi-level marketing. I've got very strong opinions about digital marketing, about personal brand, about public speaking. All those areas are areas that I've got something which is very easy to follow and quite consistent. Those points of view don't change much over time unless I learn something new, which is part of my honesty and vulnerability, that I will actually go and let people know, hey, I was wrong about this. This is what I think now. And then select what content you want to make. So that selection of the content you want to make will come down to what you have the least amount of trouble with. And I'll talk about that in a second. But you do need to build a network by connecting and interacting. If you think you're just going to go in and produce content and then walk on away, that's not how it works on LinkedIn. In fact, that's not how it works on social media. You need to build a network by actually connecting with people, not just following them, but connecting with them. Because people you are connected to, you can invite to your events. You can invite to see different things. You can tag them in, and in such a way that they will see it much more heavily highlighted in their notifications. But most of all, don't just post and run. You have to interact not just with the comments that are happening on your posts, but also go around LinkedIn, scroll through the feed, your top feed or your recent feed. Yes, there are two different feeds there, and comment on other people's stuff. In fact, my rule is before I post anything to LinkedIn, I spend about 30 minutes going through and commenting on other people's things in my feed. Why would I do that? Simply because it creates an opportunity for LinkedIn to go, something's happening with this guy. He's interacting very heavily. People are interacting back with him. They're starting to look more at his profile. Oh, and look, he just posted something as well. Therefore, he's got a much higher priority on the feed. Trust me, I have tested this theory out and it works every single time. Interact first, then post. Years ago, I learned a formula from someone who said that I think it was like she comments on 9 things before she would ever post one thing. I want to go and do 30. I want to do one a minute and more if I can do. So 30 for every one thing that I post, and then even more after that. Also, create content that matches what your target audience like. I know I just said create the kind of material that you feel comfortable with, but they also have to be things that people who you are trying to attract also relate to it, also like. If you're trying to attract young people, video works. If you're trying to attract people who are more middle to upper age, podcasts are really great for that. If you're trying to attract people who are just sort of scrolling through feeds and maybe looking for good quality content, then posting on social media could be good for you. Start and share and join in on conversations. So if there's a big conversation happening on one of your favorite influencers or the people who you are following, then join in that conversation. Add value to it. Don't just rewrite whatever the influencer wrote. That's one of the worst things. I follow a guy called Justin Welsh, and honestly, the first 30 or so messages that I see as comments in what he's posted are usually people who are just usually paraphrasing exactly what he said. It's boring, it's unimaginative, and it's just dumb. It looks dumb. It makes them look dumb. It's like, why are you just repeating what he said? Because they're trying to get attention on a feed and look clever. Join in the conversation and add your own special sauce to it, the thing that you see. And if you can't think of anything that's specifically you, that really changes the direction of the conversation that was happening, then do this one magic thing for me, won't you? Do it in your native perspective. In other words, localize it to people in your city, your state, your territory, or your country. It will make a massive difference. And then finally, have a point of view that's yours. There's nothing worse than someone who just hops on and value and what I call it, virtue signals on everything. Every single awareness day, they're all over it. Every single nice thing, they're on it. Every single thing they celebrate. And it's just at the time, it's like that positivity is toxic. It makes no sense. It gives them no personality. All they are is just a constant cheerleader for everything. And that kind of person, well, nobody really trusts. So have a point of view that's yours. If you want to stand up to something, stand up to it, but make sure you've got the ability to do that. Don't just start spurting words that you can't back up.